mentioned earlier, I have a little bit of an outsider's perspective on the environmentalism, on nature. I always find it one of my greatest goals is to connect more people to why we should care about the environment. And I try to do so by kind of zooming out and reminding all of us why these places are so important. And that anyone, not necessarily with a degree or not necessarily from Vermont or upstate New York, can connect to these special places and the ways that it really feeds and fuels us. And I'm going to start off with my personal story that I did a little bit in my introduction before I get into the content. And I promise I'm not going to read from this, but I just like to look through my notes so I don't miss any of the facts. Right now, the news cycle is not very positive. I would say it's really challenging. And a lot of people are engaging in nature to really manage their stress around the news cycle. But also, I think if you are all here, my guess is you have an idea, a sense of the challenges that the environment is facing. So I really like to get together and think about what is possible. And it's not that I'm an optimist, because I'm not. I think my husband would be stunned if somebody said, oh, somebody's labeled you an optimist. I'm a realist. But that has been informed a little bit by my life story. So as I mentioned, I'm an immigrant to this country from Poland. When I was a child, I spent half of my childhood in Sosnowiec. It was the largest coal-producing and steel town in Eastern Europe. And my earliest childhood memories of playing outside was in giant snow piles that glittered from the coal ash that would fall from the coal chimneys. My family worked in the mines. My grandfather was a coal mining engineer. And you would say, how would a young girl growing up in communist Eastern Bloc Poland wind up leading the Nature Conservancy in Vermont? It's an unlikely story. Most people, if they had to bet on that conclusion, would not have bet on me. And right now people are asking about how we get to a different future for nature with the challenges that are in front of us. And I would say my parents had 4 ingredients. They had a vision, they had audacious hope, they had a plan, and they were willing to adapt that plan as obstacles arose. And those are the 4 ingredients I would say that we really need in this moment of what is crisis for our natural environment. We need a vision, we need audacious hope, we need a plan, and we have to adapt that plan. And I really found a home at the Nature Conservancy because I really felt that those were the 4 ingredients that really make up this organization and help us think about our challenges at a really global scale. So I'm going to zoom out, Rob is going to zoom in. This is our TNC's mission, and I'm hoping my animations work. Okay, great, they are. Temperate broadleaf mixed forest, that's the forest that we know and love, that we walk in. This is our maple, our beech, our disease beech, our oak, our pine. The problem is it doesn't get the attention it deserves because we're so easily distracted by charismatic landscapes out west. Here in the Northeast, we have our humble forest that was actually significantly denuded in the 1800s, so our forest is young, sometimes lacking the diversity that Rob mentioned on the walk because of its kind of one age. It doesn't have multiple ages. We don't have the old growth and the new successional, with a lot of monoculture because of that logging. So this was the extent of the temperate broadleaf mixed forest, the forest we walk in, that we love, and this is what's left. That's a significant shift in a natural community that is host to our black bears, our songbirds, and a series of species that depend on this natural community. But why is it so special? Because it is the characteristic of our Appalachian expanse. You will see the last vestiges of it are around the Great Lakes region, in the Appalachian expanse from Alabama to Maine to the Canadian Maritimes, some isolated spots in Europe and in Asia. What that says to me is we have a special responsibility, if we care for the species that depend on this temperate broadleaf mixed forest, to protect and conserve it. And that's what makes our community in Vermont and New York, because I was talking to a New York resident, really important, and we're going to talk about why that is. So, over a dozen TNC scientists created this map to plot the movement of mammals, birds, and amphibians, shifting their ranges as they respond to warming temperatures. Species are moving 11 miles north and 33 feet in elevation each decade, including invasive species, including disease like we see now in our forests. But so are our species, and the Appalachians and that temperate broadleaf forest is actually a climate corridor. Some of us call it a nature superhighway. And because it's really hard to predict all the climactic upheavals, disruptions, TNC has gone from really being species focused to thinking about protecting the stage for nature. I'm a Mets fan, I'm sorry, so I'm going to use a baseball analogy. If you think about the game of baseball, the players change, but the arenas stay the same. We have the game because we have the arenas to play the game. We are trying to conserve and protect the arenas because we know the species are going to change, and we have to have our best investment forward to make sure that nature can persist in a wide variety of arrangements, not all of which that we can predict in these places, in these forests, lands, and waters. And because of this mapping and this research, let me see which slide, the Nature Conservancy, led by Dr. Mark Anderson, who is a Red Sox fan, but we do get along quite well, him and a team of 122 scientists plotted not only for the Appalachians, but for Canada and North America, what is called a resilient and connected network. This is a series of lands that have been identified, and waters, where we think nature has the best opportunity to persist into the future. And this mapping can be seen at the North America scale, the Canada scale, the US scale, the regional scale, and this is the Appalachian scale. We now have a program committed to the Appalachians. My predecessor, Heather Furman, now leads the Appalachians program, and we have identified the places we absolutely have to conserve, or nature's web starts to fray. Now, we always want more conservation, so these are some of the places we determined at a minimum have to be conserved. But the fact of the matter is, resources for conservation are always finite. We never have the type of resources we need to fully act in the full scale or scope that we need to act in. Interesting fact, all of philanthropic giving in the US, very generous country. We fund so many social issues. Only 4% of all philanthropic giving goes to nature and wildlife, and that includes species protections like our humane societies. So in that 4% also includes our local dog and cat shelters. So we have to be strategic. We have to think really we have to position ourselves in a way where we can achieve big things at a continental scale so that nature can continue to persist in the future. So one other thing I don't want to lose here. There are only 2 states fully within this Appalachian expanse, and that is Vermont and West Virginia. And I say that because people sometimes have this mythology about Vermont because we have so many beautiful scenic pathways and views that Vermont's okay. We're doing well here. And we are in certain respects, but we actually have an outsized responsibility in terms of our piece of the puzzle in the Appalachian expanse. And the fact of the matter is we have really degraded waterways. 75% of our rivers have been altered. We're losing over 10,000 acres of forest a year. They're saying it's probably close to 12,000 a year. So we have real threats here. And while we can look out on our beautiful landscape, we also have a really significant opportunity to be part of a globally significant landscape. And on that note, the Nature Conservancy has determined there's 4 global priorities for the Nature Conservancy because of its biodiversity. That's Borneo, Kenyan grasslands, the Amazon, and the Appalachians. That's how important this region is, and that's how important the connectivity, the connections are in this area for nature to persist.
Can you point out for the program exactly where Merck Forest is?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, and I'm going to show you we're going to keep zooming in, but like Rupert's like right there. That doesn't mean we're not conserving in this area, but the green areas, just for an example, to let me, because we're doing a lot of conservation, I'll call it from stem to stern, and you'll see it when you look at Equinox and Merck. But these are places that have been identified. For instance, outside of Brattleboro, we have identified huge developmental pressures because of how close it is to Boston and New York City. There aren't accredited local land trusts. So it's been identified as an area of deep concern where it needs resources because it doesn't have the enabling conditions on the ground in this moment to be conserving the land, that the contiguous forest blocks that we need to have to be able to connect the Berkshires to the greens and the greens to the whites. So we're often thinking about where are really highly vulnerable areas needing investment as well. And always doing work all around the state as well. These are some of our critical places. So I like to remain hopeful and think about this cradle that the Appalachians is in terms of the nature's highway. It supports over 80,000 rare species, stores more than 9 billion tons of above ground carbon. It's a critical migration corridor for over 64 high priority bird species. Provides the drinking water for more than 36 million people, mitigates 1.3 million tons of pollution. It has benefits to both nature and people. Here's a further close-up. We're mapping these places throughout the Northeast, and we're working together. One of the powers of Nature Conservancy is that our sister and brother chapters all across the Northeast, we're in it together. We're talking to each other. We're thinking about the prioritization. We're helping each other to move momentum, to mobilize, to catalyze these places. These are critical. We know that we have to conserve these places because they're critical pinch points for wildlife movement. And here we are. The colors are going to come up a little bit weird here, but not as bright as on my screen. So here's Merck in the orange. Here is Equinox, Mother Myrick Mountain. TNC preserves are in green, kind of looks really dark right here. TNC easements are in light green. Merck Forest Farmland in the orange. Federal conserved land. This is the stem to stern connectivity. Our land team is really good at looking at these maps like a puzzle. Our land protection director, John Binhammer, has been with our organization for 30 years. He has relationships with people for decades. We only work with willing landowners, and waits for the opportunity where he can connect with a landowner at a time of generational transfer or circumstances changing for that landowner to keep filling in the blanks for conservation. Did you want to say something, Rob? No, okay. So how do we work on all of these efforts? I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about our pillars, because first of all, nature is very interconnected. It's hard to bucket our work because it all impacts each other. We work on land, water, climate, and stewardship. We are the second largest private landowner in the state of Vermont. That's over 42,000 acres. It's a huge management responsibility. For those of you that are intimately involved with Merck, you know how much work it goes to being a landowner. We have over 40,000 acres. We have a 50 natural area network. We have land in every single county, and it takes a lot of resources. A lot of people think we conserve the land, we're done. There's always work to be done. There's restoration, there's boundary marking, we have legal compliance. It takes a lot of work. We work on climate, mostly in the policy space, but sometimes we get into renewable energy siting conversations, really thinking about where appropriately sited renewable energy is. We work on fresh water, dam, barrier removal, and of course we conserve land and look at all the full mechanisms of how we do that. We've been here for over 65 years. We've conserved over 300,000 acres of land in Vermont, really iconic places like Jamaica State Park, Equinox, North Paulet Hills, Eshqua Bog, Hamilton Falls. What a lot of folks may not know, Porter, actually slightly higher, 28% of all public lands in Vermont were initially conserved by TNC. We conserve it. This is one of our values. We can conserve it, we can transfer it to the state or federal entities like at Conti for federal lands or other local land trusts. Then we can recoup those resources in most cases and go on to the next project. The state can't be nimble, they can't act quickly when a parcel goes on the market. TNC can, we can do that. We can take a loan out against ourselves and be able to make that opportunity happen. One of our really important value adds. It's very important to us that places like Merck and local land trusts and watershed organizations exist. We cannot do all of this work alone. We're working at a large scale. People often say, oh, I wish you guys were doing education and outreach. I was like, there's great groups doing education and outreach. We're really focused on mobilizing resources to have the greatest impact at scale, but we love our education and outreach centers. The role of Merck, North Branch Nature Center, Intervale, and Burlington are absolutely critical. If we're all doing the same work, then nobody really lets their value shine in this work. We need local land trusts. Very, very important that there's local holdings in each of these communities. We're really at that capacity tipping point for our stewardship team, being such a large landowner in Vermont. So important our partnership with local community conservation organizations. And this is our team, and I always want to end here because sometimes we think, you know, nature's going to be okay, and it is. I don't want to give that impression away, but it takes people, it takes our staff, it takes the people in this room, it takes communities caring about these outcomes for future generations. We couldn't do the work we do without our local partners on the ground and without our staff. You know, it's really hard to get funding for staff time. The project doesn't happen by itself. Land projects are hard. You know, they take legal expertise, legal consult. It takes scientists and ecologists. When we're working on our climate work, it takes policy specialists. We wouldn't be able to have the types of outcomes without the people at its core.
I started at Merck about 8.5 years ago, and when I did, our then board president, one day when we were out for coffee, was like, geez, we really ought to think beyond Merck's boundaries at some point. We're now, as of this year, a 75-year-old organization, and for the first 68 or so years, Merck exclusively focused on an area within our boundaries, which is pictured at this cluster of points here that I'll talk about in a second. And the more we talked, the more we realized that that kind of thinking ran the risk of essentially cleaning our room while our kitchen was on fire, potentially, right? So if we're focused on making sure everything's working really well here, but there's stuff happening here that influences us at the landscape level, then, we've missed the mark. So we began to think broader, and we began to do that around the same time that, I'm going to forget the TNC ecologist's name, but he was on a road tour with that migrations and motion work, and the then director of Smoky House and I drove over to the Vermont Law School in Randolph, and we're able to see the launch of that kind of, look what we've done this tremendous amount of monitoring, we see this happening, and he and I were sitting there and recognizing that this is an hourglass-shaped corridor with a narrow waist, with a pinch point that is in this landscape that both Smoky House and Merck are situated in. And it was just a moment of realization that, whoa, we really do, we're working with something bigger than ourselves here and need to think beyond our boundaries. When we think beyond our boundaries, we think about that migratory corridor, our important role in that migratory corridor. We think about the northern Appalachian-Canadian ecoregion because it's our home ecoregion. And we also think of the hummingbird landscape highlighted here, the largest unfragmented forest block in the Taconic Mountains. That means there's no impermeable surface, there's no road, there's no permanent housing. There is nothing but unfragmented forest from here, that direction, to Arlington, Vermont. Yeah. See, so this is Route 30 bounds it on one side, 315, I forget the number of the road in Arlington, and then there's a little dirt road to the west. But these big 42, this is like I said, the largest unfragmented block of the Taconic. These big blocks like this, situated at the pinch point of that migratory corridor, are critical for those charismatic species that we get really excited when we see because they don't like to be around us. Because they don't like to be around us, they need spaces where we're not. Spaces like this. So we think a lot about working with organizations like TNC, organizations like VLT, who think about larger landscapes like this, have helped us conserve this landscape, and are thinking about how we can conserve more of this land and landscape. Then I want to bring the people piece back into it, because I mentioned that arc we saw in that last slide. You can see that arc kind of playing out in these same data points. These are individual observations from a platform called iNaturalist. So each one of these dots represents somebody that's gone out into the woods and taken a photograph of a species, uploaded it onto iNaturalist, and if they've done it with a cell phone, and that cell phone was able to geotag that photograph, it becomes a scientifically significant record that researchers at UMass, at UVM, at any research institution can use to confirm the presence of the species that's been pictured in that. And you'll notice all of this activity corresponds to that arc of conservation that you saw in Eve's last slide. So again, when we think about that, people and the landscape, spaces like Merck Forest, spaces like the conserved lands of TNC and Equinox Preserve Trust provide an opportunity for us to get people into the woods, to build connections with these lands and landscapes, and help motivate action that can inspire the future protection of these spaces. One of the things that we sort of advertised and pitched for this was like, well, how do you take action? You're already taking the first step. Being in a space like this, educating yourself, understanding what's going on, driving with curiosity into our woods is critical as we try and protect it moving forward. This is another step that people can take. When you're out in the woods, if you want to leave your phone at home, great, take it sometimes. Capture what you find. That allows us, like we said, resources are limited. Participatory citizen science is a nearly unlimited resource. If people can get out there and capture information for us, we can use that information to understand things like I was talking about earlier, the advanced of oaks, you know, how things are changing, new species that come into the landscape as the climate warms. And it is going to warm. It's already started. I can't help it. I'm sorry. I gotta look at big time for just a moment. So essentially, you are here. We as a species started around here. Everything we think of as like modern culture, city, agriculture, all of that stuff emerged in this really pretty flat line called the Holocene. And if you've seen the Michael Mann, I think was the originator of the hockey stick curve, you know, stable climate and all of a sudden warming temperatures. This is so zoomed out that it's hard to see it, but here's the hockey stick. The flat shaft and then the head of the hockey stick there shooting up. That's observed temperature. That's not like, hey, maybe things might get warmer, maybe things are going to change. That's what has already happened. These lines are predictive models. This predictive model is like a no change, burn all the fossil fuel scenario. This predictive model is massive mitigation. But even in massive mitigation, we see significant change. Somewhere in between this line and this line, you get, this is called the Paleocene, Eocene thermal maximum. This whole space here is like palm trees. I said this to somebody earlier. Palm trees at the poles and alligators in the Arctic. It's a different world. This isn't temperate forest anymore.
Well, the Pedum had about 40 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's the Pedum. Paleo-Eocene thermal maximum. That's what you're looking at right there.
Yeah.
That's a geological Pedum. That's a geological fix. But we've been hotter than that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you go back, and we've been hotter than that a number of times in the last 450 million years, and I use 450 million years just because that's more or less how long there have been forests on the planet. So our forests have persisted through extremes more than we're even projecting with climate change, but we have not. And the other thing that's important to think about when we look at this is these intervals are millions, these intervals are thousands, and these intervals are hundreds, not even, 50s. So the timeline on this graph compresses dramatically. This change is going to happen 10 to 100 times as fast if these models hold up as any climatic change has happened on the planet. Not the first time the landscape that we're sitting in has changed fundamentally. So this is the hardwood barn that we looked at earlier. This is the forest that we walked through to get here. This was sort of, post-colonial sheep boom, birth of the global wool and global timber market, denuded Vermont almost entirely. Vermont went from something like 88 to 89% forested to 22 to 26% forested in the course of about a human generation. Here, the primary growth was cut in the early 1800s, and then the mills moved south down towards Equinox, cut all the primary growth back there. By the time they were done, there was merchantable secondary growth here in the sort of post-World War II era, and that all got cut again. And what remains is an incredibly even-aged forest. So when we talked about diversity being such an important asset for forests to survive challenges, now we've got a forest that what grew previously for 12,000 years with sort of minor with human management, but not human management at this scale, that was denuded in a single human generation. So massive change. Now, you can think about our forest, like if you lived in Boston, and next Wednesday, everyone working in Boston was going to retire on the same day, what would happen to the infrastructure in the city? Our forest is kind of like that. It's all the same age, it's all going to retire on essentially the same day. So a lot of the work that we do, and this is that forest that we're talking about, it looks like we get visitors from far away who get the green salt of nature. They look out there and they're like, oh, everything's okay. But with as many of those visitors as possible, we try and dig a little bit deeper and engage them in understanding that things are getting better, there are challenges coming, but we need to be plugged into this and understand how we can support the species that we share this landscape with as we move forward into an uncertain future. So this is that even age forest that I was talking about. This is what most of Merck looks like. This is what most of Vermont looks like. This is work that Tony D'Amato at the University of Vermont and Paul Catanzaro at the University of Massachusetts have done. We'll dig into it because it's inspired a significant percentage of the management that we've done here at Merck in the last few years. So, you can see here, this is second growth forest that's approximately 100 years old. I won't read this stuff to you, you're welcome to look at it, but it lacks critical features that our primary forest had. So we think, this is that second growth forest that we just looked at. That picture that you saw was from Merck. It's most of what Merck looks like, exactly like this. This is what old growth forest looks like. You can see a lot of stuff in here. Coarse dead, woody debris, standing dead trees, the more sophisticated layering in the canopy, trees of a variety of size and age class, even aged and diverse structure. So when we go into the woods, we're generally trying to create more diverse structure. So this is from a series of cascading openings that we've created in the canopy that if you were to continue past that wood shop that we were in, kind of down the hill towards the stone lot and move off to your left, we've created these canopy openings that are approximately 2 acres in size, and the intention there is to create sustainable young forest habitat for a variety of species, some bird species that are return nesters and sort of rely on young forest. This isn't young forest yet, but there is adjacent young forest, sort of where I'm standing right now. As the intention here is, as that ages out and matures, this will age into a similar category, and then the return nesters like our chestnut-sided warblers will be able to come back and still meet their habitat need. And there's a tremendous lack of young forest in the state because of that even age nature. So when we go into the woods to harvest timber, to do projects like the one we looked at earlier, we try and do it in a way that's got an ecological focus, a habitat focus, or a forest health focus. Another example is, so this is what that young forest looks like when it starts to mature a little bit. Here, instead of the opening that you see in the canopy there, although you've got those structural elements that we want, you've got that dead wood on the ground that's going to provide cover, both coarse dead wood here, big stuff, little stuff that things can hide in. You've got standing dead trees. This is going to become a buffet, right? It's going to fill itself with insects, and then a variety of species are going to take advantage of that at various levels in the food web. In 6 to 9 years, maybe even sooner, it's going to start to look like this. These would-be trees will begin to, this is through the shrub, like next there'll be shrubby, raspberries and things like this, and then after that, you'll get to this successional stage. This is actually, if we were to get on the trail here, walk the Discovery Trail back towards the visitor center, you'd find this on your left. This is a 1 acre cut that we maintain for grouse habitat, and we have seen paired grouse in there this year, which is really exciting. And then, so there are specific treatments that we think about when we do this work. Like we leave a lot of big down timber there because they need drumming logs for mating season. They need this really thicket-like forests because they spend a lot of time on the ground and that affords them protection. But these are habitats that overwhelmingly are lacking from Vermont's woods. So when we go into the woods to do this work, we think, okay, can we create spaces that are advantageous to the species that are experiencing population threat due to minimal habitat, and at the same time, can we create diversity that will help achieve greater forest health? And then, a lot of the times, it's incredibly complex. So it's not always a matter of right and wrong. A lot of times it's a matter of objective versus objective and which one makes more sense here. Then if we pick this objective, it's got this consequence. So then maybe we try and find somewhere else where those two things balance out. It's also, science is about kind of being curious and being the least amount wrong as possible. So we're constantly trying to keep up with science, and as it learns, we're trying to learn and shape and inform our practices. I'm sure there are decisions that I've made in the woods here that my grandchildren will come back to and look at, and it'll be like walking into a house with a conversation pit. If that's familiar, like step down into the chimenea in the middle and the circular couch. We're not making those too much anymore. So you can pinpoint when that house was done. There will be things in our woods that my kids and their kids will be able to go see and be like, oh, Dad did this in 2023. Because we would never do this now. But that's because we did it, we studied it, we learned why it didn't work, and now we can do something better. So is all this stuff right? No. But it's as right as we can be right now, and hopefully it's contributing to a body of knowledge that'll let us improve as we go. So this is an incomplete list of some of our neighbors. Vermont has an estimated 3.5 billion trees and around 650,000 people. So we've got more tree neighbors than we have people neighbors. 80% of Vermont's forest is made up of just 9 of these trees. So I'll let you think about it for a second. Which 9 is it going to be? And then I'll highlight them in 20 seconds.
Red maple, sugar maple.
Hey, you're on.
White ash.
I'm hearing them.
Hawthorne.
White oak. Red oak.
Red oak.
All right, 3, 2,
Eastern hemlock.
1. There we are. For a southern Vermonter, it's almost a trick question because we're approaching the northern range of oak. So we've got these oak-dominated landscapes that make it feel like lots of oak, but you move up and you move north and we start to lose that. So of these species, we looked at one that's under immediate threat, right? There are actually 3.
White ash.
Yep.
Sugar maple.
Beech, white ash, beech, and hemlock. Exactly. And somebody mentioned climate change. So this is work that connects to something that Dr. Ali Kasiba's done. She worked for Forest Parks and Recreation, was Vermont's first climate forester. She's now with UVM Extension out of Burlington. Works statewide, thinking about supporting land managers like us as we make decisions about how to try and create increased resilience in the face of that dramatic change that we looked at earlier on the graph. But it's not fair for us to say well, our forest is under pressure because of climate change. Climate change doesn't necessarily kill trees. Drought does, insects do, pathogens do, a whole bunch of things do. But climate change is, at the top here because it's a tremendous predisposing factor. It makes everything worse, right? Things are drier, things are warmer, it's harder for trees. The 3 species that we just mentioned, beech, white ash, and eastern hemlock, we talked about this one, nematode, insect, emerald ash borer, and insect, hemlock woolly adelgid. Vermont, in the last 20 years, has warmed about 2.5 degrees on average, but that average hasn't distributed evenly across our seasons and across our highs and lows. We haven't really warmed up that much on summertime highs, even though we feel a little bit warmer. Where we've really warmed is wintertime lows. In the last 20 years, we're up about 7 degrees. Our wintertime lows are 7 degrees warmer than they were 20 years ago. That means range expansion, northward range expansion for that nematode, that insect, and that insect. Our hard winters used to prevent them from being here, they don't anymore. So this white ash is here, the estimated timeline until, or not white ash, emerald ash borer is here on the south end of the property. I know the estimated timeline for this is 6 years until we lose the ash. There are lingering white ash, there is hope, we are going to talk about that later. I'm not sure what the timeline for American beech is yet. We don't have hemlock woolly belgic, but is this a 25-year timeline that we lose these 3 trees in this landscape? A 30-year timeline, maybe 50? That's 3 out of the 9 species that make up 80% of our woods statewide. And then there are 3 more that you could consider climate losers. They need their roots colder and wetter than soils are going to be here at some point in the not too distant future. Red spruce, balsam fir, and sugar maple. This is a tremendous amount of disturbance for our woods. This is a lot of species that we may stand to lose. So I wrote down, underlined it, and put exclamation points next to one of the words that you used earlier. Adapt that plan. We are entering, as land managers, the age of adaptation. We are still working with big data sets. We're still doing monitoring. We're still trying to conduct long-term peer-reviewed science in the way that we classically have to understand what's happening in the woods. But we're also recognizing that if the slope of the line gets as steep as some of our climate scientists predict it will, we're going to have to guess and check. We may not, in some instances, be able to wait on 40-year monitoring plots that build enough data to allow us to figure out what we might want to try and do in the woods, because 40 years may be too late for some of these species. So we're constantly rethinking what management's going to look like for us. And we get support in that work. This is you can actually see when we're done, you can come over to the window, and in the view shed here, maybe the maples will block it, but there's an opening in the canopy. This is that opening. This is a cut that we conducted last year using 2 reports that were co-issued by the University of Vermont and the University of Massachusetts. One about accelerating the presence of old forest characteristics through active management, and a second about responding to emerald ash borer infestation and trying to create resilience in the wood that will lead to survivorship. Our white ash do have a chance. We've seen in the North Woods white ash recovery, less likely for black ash and green ash. We're high elevation woods. We don't really have black ash and green ash. We do have a lot of white ash. So about 5% of white ash do survive infestation. We don't know why.
What elevation do you consider high elevation?
Here we're upland, so we started about 1,800 feet. The closest kind of black ash that I know of near us are down in those swampy areas off Route 7 as you head towards Bennington. So fundamentally, like you could look up into the peaks and see where Merck is. But that's where those white, black ash and green ash tend to live.
Why in the Middle Valley there are black ash and nearby forests?
Not yet, down in the valley, right?
Just back near Public Village.
Oh, that's good to know. I haven't seen those. And then so what happened here is we created an opening in the forest because and now it's no longer an even age forest. Right now there's this forest that's sort of 100 years old, and this forest here that as of this year is 1. Right, so that's got both structural and age class diversity that didn't have before. We've also, this is just a tiny snapshot of the job, but you can see this fine woody debris. Like a messy forest is a healthy forest. All this messy stuff is habitat. All this messy stuff also in places where we do have deer pressure. An adult deer can eat up to 40 pounds of like little buds, leaves, and nips in a day. In some places, like as near as the Catskills, they've been designated no regeneration zones, like forests can't grow there because of the deer pressure. Structures like this create spaces that are impenetrable by deer, but allow little seedlings to grow. So, and they also provide cover for rodents. There's a whole bunch of different benefits of this debris down on the ground. But if you can imagine an unmanaged old forest, when a tree fell, it stayed. Now, when a tree falls, we take it out of the woods. So part of this job was, this was all like merchantable wood that a landowner, we could have sold, a landowner could have sold, but to create habitat value, we're like, no, you gotta leave those. So the logger scratches his head head, and we're just like, it's really important to us. Now, okay, that's fine, I'm getting paid, I'll do what you ask, you're the landowner. The other thing that we did in here, there are a lot of places that are like right in the middle of Alps ash salvage harvests. Like, I'm gonna take as many ash now while they still have value as I can, and I'm gonna sell it before they all die and they have no value. We left most of the male and female ash, you know, of about this size, because they're healthy trees, strong trees, they're of good breeding age, and they're more likely to create regeneration.
Is there any initiative in the logging industry to educate loggers about this and the importance of this continuum?
Yeah, there's a program in Vermont called LEAP that does that work, and we've hosted LEAP workshops here. And there's actually a really strong effort in our state that's geared towards landowners, loggers, and foresters to do that education work. Audubon does a ton of that, Forest Parks and Rec does a ton, the University of Vermont does a
But
ton.
is there any requirement that loggers stay licensed participate in this education?
I think I don't know, loggers don't have, foresters have continuing education requirements. I don't think that loggers do. I think most advocacy organizations in the state have identified the landowner as the key stakeholder, because ultimately the landowner is the decision maker, so the landowner tells the forester what they want done. The forester marks the job, and then the logger goes in as a contractor and does what the forester marked. So there are organizations that work at each one of those levels, but the overwhelming majority of the statewide entities run the landowner, from what I see. The other thing worth understanding about ash regeneration is ash they're not a shade tolerant species. So as these ash die singularly and fall down, ash won't regenerate in that space. Ash needs more than like a canopy opening. In general, anything's possible, right? Life is amazing. But in general, ash needs more than a single tree canopy opening to regenerate. So big, like 2-acre spaces like this bring a lot of light down to the forest floor and favor ash because they're more sun tolerant than some of the shade tolerant species that would otherwise compete with them if the canopy was more whole. Yeah.
I just need to say, people can grumble about them all they like, but multiflora, rose, buckthorn, barberry, those sort of plants also have similar benefits to the junk trees, and excluding deer and letting trees grow up through them. At least their skeletons, possibly.
I hesitate, this is risky. I'm trying to decide whether or not to say it. Am I safe? How we think about invasive species, I think is going to change. Maybe not in my lifetime, but in the next 3 generations, I think it's going to change fundamentally. As organisms, they have among the highest plasticity. They respond and adapt faster than anything. It's one of the reasons why they're so successful. At some point, we're going to need things that respond and adapt really fast because of the change. It's probably not a me problem. I will be feeding trees by then, so I don't even know if that's going to be a thing. But keep your eye on them, right? And then, like I said, I'm going to end it here. We do this work with people. Like I said, this is the most densely populated intact forest on the planet. This is a social ecological system. This isn't an ecological system separate from people. We live in this landscape, we work in this landscape, we steward in this landscape. So, a big part of our work here at Merck, I'll joke with our ed team sometimes, it's like if a tree falls in the woods at Merck and there was no one there to hear it, why didn't we get somebody there? Right? What do we need to do next time? And so someone understands why that tree fell, what the advantages and disadvantages are, and what we need to do moving forward. That's both current generation decision makers. That's Tony Romano right there, one of the co-authors of those 2 reports that I showed, working with public and private lands professionals. So mostly at the forestry level, but a handful of loggers and folks that work with private landowners and folks that work on public lands in this room, learning about that. We talked about that treatment that we did there, how it mimicked the recommendations in the report, and then went and looked at them so those foresters could see, this is what that work looks like. Right down to, this is just a public program with folks of all ages. These are kindergartners from a local school. Like, this is building next generation stewards. The forest exists at a different timeline than we exist. We're here and gone in a second. We need to make sure that we pass on to as many of the 20,000 people that come here every year a sense of stewardship and caring, because they're in for a big challenge in this landscape and landscapes like it. And again, we are able to do work at this level because of the tremendous science that organizations like GNAT-TV do, that University of Vermont does. Like, they're taking care of the science so that we can get into the woods with as many people as possible, try and figure out what's feasible, what isn't feasible, and learn alongside those folks that are doing